Good morning. Thank you guys for coming this morning. Hopefully you guys were not too late. And if you were, I will try to keep it very loud for you. Get that aspirin working. All right, so this talk is about migrating content management sites, WCM sites, over to SharePoint 2013. My name is Israel Vega. I am a consultant based out of Tampa, Florida. I work for Microsoft, and we'll just get a few kind of housekeeping things out of the way. My job is to make that site look like that site. At the end of this talk, nothing will happen. I'm lying. You'll see a few things. This is a SharePoint 2010 site. I have migrated over to SharePoint 2013. This, what you're seeing, is the 2010 version of that. There are some things that I've got from a design perspective that I'm still tweaking, and I'm not going to tweak those on stage. But I want to just show you the mechanics of how to go through it, and you'll be armed with the tools to actually make it look and make it finish like this. So at the end of this talk, again, nothing will happen. It is absolutely on purpose. A few housekeeping items. Every great SharePoint presentation at SharePoint Conference has a modern UI slide for those keeping track. Also have a picture of a surface. Gotta have some kittens. And everyone loves puppies. So I'm keeping those. I gotta have a reference to the cloud. All right, so I've met the criteria for great SharePoint conference sessions. All right, let's go back. What I did was I took a moving theme to this talk. And I recently moved out of a house and moved into another house. And it was kind of painful, right? There was a few things I had to deal with. There's a few things I had to pack up in boxes and a few things I had to get rid of. But what I did was I tried to draw parallels between migration and moving. So you'll see some of that come out in the talk. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop that content database, and I'm going to reattach my 2010 content database. It's going to take a little while to run, so I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Execute that. Here, all I'm doing is I have a backup of my Contoso content database. That content database has some managed metadata columns from SharePoint 2010, and I'm going to bring that over as well, but I've already mounted that because that takes a little while to mount as well. So here I've got my SharePoint 2010 site mounted. Here's some PowerShell. This PowerShell, all it's doing is going to mount that content database on. It's going to update the schema. I've already deployed my WSPs, and I'll walk through some of the steps of how you would do this, but I'm going to go ahead and run this because this takes a little while to run. So go ahead and run that. And we'll go back. Some common things that you did with WCM sites in both 2007 and 2010. One of the groups that we have is UI and branding, right? I just built a custom UI site, made it very pretty, added some master pages, some page layouts, and some CSS. Some other things you probably did was roll-up and syndication. Maybe did some things around search on SharePoint 2010. Maybe you did some accessing other sites and pulling some things together. You might have done platform consolidation on SharePoint 2010, where you hosted one central platform that then served multiple websites. That was some other things that around web content management sites I've seen a lot of customers do. The last one there is you might have built some extranets and some secure collaboration with your partners, with your customers. You may have done that. The one that I'm focusing on for this talk is that top one, that top UI and branding one. So that's what you're going to see as far as moving over. We'll talk about a few things around roll-up. We'll talk a few things about platform consolidation throughout the talk, but I'm not going to demonstrate that. The one I'm focusing on specifically is the UI and branding. You've probably seen this slide throughout, or some semblance of this slide throughout the talk. There's a bunch of new features that we added for WCM. If you think about the amount of love WCM got a whole bunch of love this release. And here's a lot, some hints into the amount of love that there's there. I'm going to show you the things that are in orange. I'll show you a few of those. Some design tool support. Design Manager, we'll see that throughout the talk. We'll see some managed navigation. Hopefully we will see some clean URLs if I can get that working for you guys on stage, but we'll see some of that. Some other things that are specific to internet sites that you really have to keep in mind when you're migrating claims-based authentication. You're going to have to migrate from classic to claims if you haven't done that already in SharePoint 2010. Some other things that you're going to have to think about is specifically around search. So the search experience has changed. If you built fast search center sites based on the fast search center template in SharePoint 2010, there is still that template available in SharePoint 2013, but it's really not working. You bring it over, and the web parts don't work because they're pointed to different assemblies. So from a search experience standpoint, what you want to do is think about rebuilding your search experience. That's one of the things that you're going to have to do. The SharePoint Designer, I'm sure you've probably applauded inside and you feel warm and happy that we removed the actual SharePoint design view from SharePoint Designer. You're still able to get in there and see some SharePoint sites, but it's more of an administrative tool. You can still see the HTML and things like that, but the design view experience is gone. So what we did is, in favor of so not having the SharePoint design view, we're going to go ahead and allow you to use your favorite design tool on your favorite platform if you choose to. There's no in-place upgrade. We removed that. So the attach database, detach, and attach to a SharePoint 2013 farm is going to be the only way you're going to go about it. And then web analytics and workflow, there's some changes there. Lots of other talks on that. So if you want to see some more information on that, go take a look at the recordings. What are some common reasons people move? Why would I want to move from SharePoint 2010 or 2007? So here, some common reasons for us moving. We wanted to move to a better neighborhood. We outgrew the space. We have, the kids are getting big. We were inspired by a new space. You've probably felt a little bit of these things throughout the week. SharePoint's pretty cool. They got a lot of new features. I want to get rid of my customizations, and I want to use some of the stuff that's out of the box. There are lots of common reasons for moving. The only reason I put this slide here is that you have to keep this in mind as you go through your migration. You have to understand, why are you moving? Are you moving to actually take advantage of a replatform, or are you moving to just move your content over from point A to point B? All right, so what? I got to move. Great. What are some things I do before I move? No giggles. Wow. No, come on. She's funny. She's worrying. She's worrying about her move. There's some other things you do, right? You throw some things in the garbage. You might label some things and inventory some things. We'll talk through that. We talked about why you're moving. You want to inventory your stuff. You want to take a look at all your sites that you're actually going to migrate. You want to identify your move type, and we'll talk through that in a second. You also want to prepare yourself. You want to prepare your environment. You want to make sure that your SQL databases are up to speed on the service packs. You want to make sure that your SharePoint is up to speed on your service packs as well. And you want to pick a good time to move. So if you're a retailer, you're probably not going to want to migrate in November. November's a bad time for retailers. You want to probably do that in June or July, so start practicing for that. Things like that. So you got to pick a good time for actually doing the migration, because it's going to take you some time. Whenever you're looking at identifying your different move type, really what you're doing is you're trying to balance all of these things, right? What is it that I'm going to be moving? How am I going to be moving? And what am I going to be doing? All of them are going to balance these 4 components at a very high level as part of your migration. And what you want to do is, at the end of it, you don't want to end up like this lady, where she painted herself into a corner, and she may have gone down the path of creating a whole bunch of new customizations just because I could, or not taking advantage of the platform because I didn't know it was available. So you just don't want to do that. There are no giggles in this room. That is awesome. I worked hard on those slides. First one, identifying your move type. Existing to new. I just want to take my stuff from SharePoint 2010 and just move it over. That's it. I just want to take it, put it over on the new platform, and leave it there. My other new type might be an existing to new plus, where I've got to take my stuff over, and if you hear the words, I want it to look exactly like except, I want to just bring over my SharePoint 2010 content, but if you hear those words as part of the phrase when you're talking to your business folks, this is probably where you are. And you want to do a little bit of the first one, and then you're going to start moving into the second one. I'm going to demo a little bit of the first one and then the second one. Another move type is a new from existing. This is where you're looking at content migration, probably content migration tools. I don't like what I did in 2007 and 2010, but I still need that content, right? So I might be migrating that stuff over using a third-party tool. I might be integrating that, and I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. But this is a new from existing, right? I'm inspired by that. Another one is just a completely brand new site. I might use some of my old content. I might not. I might use some of my old branding. I might not. but it's a completely brand new site. Why this is important is because each one of these paths is going to lead you to different decisions that you're going to make, and it's also going to lead you to different decisions around the inventory and the type of content, things you're actually going to be doing as part of your project. So let's think about some of the moving supplies we're going to need. First thing we need is we need our WSPs and source code. If we don't have them, we can dump them out of our SharePoint 2010 content database. But we definitely need those. We have to take those SharePoint 14, SharePoint 2010 WSPs and move those over to our 2013 environment. We also need some wireframes and design assets. The reason we need this is because if you're taking advantage of some of the new features, you have to know where those plug in. I'll show you an example of that towards the end of the deck, but you have to kind of keep that in mind of what is it that I'm actually going to be designing. I need my content. That's a big deal. So you saw me. I had my content in my content database. And then I need migration goals. So in my scenario, I'll talk to a brief story of the fictional Contoso pharmaceutical company. You also need the right size moving company. You need your decision makers. You need people that understand that content, that can be able to point to it and say, we need this, we don't need that. Yes, I own that. No, I don't own that. You don't want to bring over all that garbage. So you want to make sure that you have somebody actually looking at the site and saying, yes, that content's valid, this content's not valid. Here's some other moving company type people that you might need. A big one there is user experience and branding. If you are going to be rebranding, you're in that existing to new content space or migration space, then you're going to need some new UI. What does the move actually look like? So in our case here, it's our fictional Contoso Pharmaceuticals company. Phase 1, they just want to move to SharePoint 2013, so they're going to do that existing to new. Phase 2 is what I'll show later on, is I want to enable new 2013 features, right? Once I got my stuff over, great, how do I take advantage of some of the new features, like Managed Nav? Some of the concerns that they have for this first migration is I want to make sure that I maintain my existing UI. I want it to look as close to as possible what it looks like, and I also want to maintain my external URLs. So I don't want you to change any URLs. I'm not going to change my site structure or anything like that. I just want you to bring my stuff over. The overall process we're going to go through is kind of this step by step. The things in orange are the things that I've done already. So I've backed up and restored. I've installed my WSPs, and I've mounted my SharePoint 2010, and I have migrated over to Claim. So I've done that. We're going to go to that last one, which is test. We're going to go see that right now. All right, so here we see that my content database attached. I converted it over to claims. So if you see this last one here, is the convert. One second. Convert hyphen SP web application. That's how I take my content database and move it over to claims. So now let's take a look and see what that actually created for us. Go back over here. This is the site that I destroyed. We'll go to the author site and go to the website. All right, so there's my external site, and we see something interesting. We see that our site collection just popped up, and it's running SharePoint 2010. However, it gives me that little banner that says, hey, do you want to upgrade the site collection? For my site, I do want to show you that we do have some stuff in the background, and it's all looking like 2010. Now, this is SharePoint 2013, still looking like 2010. Strange. I don't want that. I want to go ahead and update that. Let's update our site collection. Yes, I'm ready. Let's shoot that off. That's going to take a little while. Let's come back, and then we'll see what upgrade site collection actually does. So in SharePoint 2010, that's what my site looked like. SharePoint 2013, that's what my site looks like. Strange. Why is that? Under the hood, we have two hives. Under the hood, we have a 14 hive and a 15 hive. If you install your SharePoint 2010 WSPs, you can specify the compatibility level. If you do not specify it, when running this command, it will look at your manifest file inside the WSP and actually port it to the right hive. In my case, I specified a compatibility level, and I said, go ahead and install these features in the 14 hive, and go ahead and install these features in the 15 hive. And what that allowed SharePoint to do is keep track of the features that I have and actually reuse those and not break my site, which is a good thing. What you saw when I modded and destroyed my content database and remounted it, I hit refresh, it looked exactly the same. It looked just like my 2010 site. I got absolutely no applause for that, but that's not my feature, and I don't expect that. All right. Let's see what our site looks like. Upgrade completed with errors. That's not good. I'm in front of people. This was not supposed to happen. Go, go, go. Refresh, refresh, go, go, go. All right, come on. Give us a little bit. All right, I'll take a few questions while this goes. Any questions so far? Yes, sir. Yes. So the question is, what do I do with my WSPs? Do I want to bring them over before or after? You want to bring them over before, and then you want to do a test SP content database. And what that's going to do is it's going to look at the features that are on the file system, look at the content database that's associated with the one that you're trying to attach, and then make sure that that content database can actually be attached to that web app. You can do it afterwards, but you're going to get a whole bunch of errors, and you're not going to know what those errors are. You're not going to know if they're related to features or if they're related to actual problems with the upgrade. Come on. All right. I don't want to do this again. That it worked. All right, sorry. Any other questions? Yes, sir. So the question is, do you want to be patched and up to what level? Is it SP1 or the latest cumulative update? If I remember correctly, it's at least Service Pack 1 for SharePoint 2010. And then for SharePoint, for SQL 2008 R2, it's got to be at least Service Pack 1. Otherwise, you're going to get an error when you try to restore that content database to the farm. It's going to give you some errors. Yes, sir. How about custom site definitions? Let me keep hitting refresh here. Okay. Yes, sir. Now, I love custom site definitions. I do, and I will get it on the recording. Yeah, custom site defs. However, custom site defs, something that you should have not done in 2007, something you should have not done in 2010. Web templates was the way to go in 2010. There are some things that you just can't do with web templates. But if you have the custom site definitions, your first caveat is going to be, I can't move to the cloud, right? I've got to take that content. If you want to keep them, you might bump yourself into that third layer, which is new from existing. I want to take my migrated content and I want to put it into a new structure. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to actually take your site defs that are on the file system, bring them over, make sure you've got all your features and everything updated. Just bring your site defs over. Do a diff between your feature hives and make sure that your site defs are there prior to you attaching that content database and prior to you running that. All that should work underneath the covers because the infrastructure is still there, but your mileage may vary on some of the additional customizations that you've made. All right, so here, let's go see my new site. See what happened. Oh, whoa, nice. All right, what happened here? Well, what happened here was I have a SharePoint 2010 master page, and that's still in there. And I'm trying to run it on my SharePoint 2013 site. After I upgrade my site collection to SharePoint 2013, my master page actually gets swapped. My master page gets swapped from the 2010 one to the Seattle master, which is the default master page. So let's go ahead and change that. Change our master page back to our 2010 master page. See what that looks like. Blech. Right? What's going on here? Why does it look like this, right? I've got some of the stuff, but I don't have all of it. Well, remember I mentioned earlier that you have to upgrade the search experience. Well, with SharePoint 15, there's some new stuff. And when you upgrade that site collection to SharePoint 15, what happens is you're now pointing at a different hive. So all your JavaScript, all your CSS, some of that stuff may have come over, but some of it may have not. So let's go ahead and change that. What I have here is a Visual Studio Express. And here what I have is some things, and I'll show you a visual of what this looks like in a minute. But here, what we're doing is we're pulling over some SharePoint 15 JavaScript. We're also adding some meta tags. So we're changing our HTML tag to SPHTML tag. There's some other things we have to do down towards the bottom around a SharePoint form tag. So we've got to pull that over from Seattle Master. And then the other thing we have to do is towards the bottom here. We want to put our new ribbon in here. So we'll take our ribbon from Seattle Master. We'll copy it into our SharePoint 2010, copy of our SharePoint 2010 master page, and that's going to be our master page. Let's go back to our site. Let's upload our master page. So I have an extranet 2013. So what I've done is I've already pre-moved the stuff over. So I got a 2013 master page. It is a master page. And I'm going to say it's compatible with 4 and 15. Our math is not that good anymore. That's some backwards compat, that's right. All right, so there's our master page. We'll go back to our site settings. And we will change our master page to our new, where was we got? This is not happy with me today. Oh, I know why. I apologize. I forgot to do something. All right. When I brought over my SharePoint 2010 content database, in SharePoint 2010, I had moderation on for my master pages, and I was supposed to run the script, and I did not, to shut off the moderation. Now, if I go in and approve my master page, it'll show up, but I just want to go ahead and run this to turn off moderation. You probably wouldn't do this in production. You probably want moderation. That's a good thing, but here I'm just going to run this and shut that off. All right. Let's go back here. Master page. Please show up. Extranet master. It is there. Back here. Site settings, master page. Why are you not showing up? I don't like you, SharePoint. I see dead master pages. You are a publishing master page, and I want you to be compatible. These versions. We're going to go back to site settings now. Master page, there we go. Change our master page over to SharePoint. All right. Still doesn't look like we want it, right? But what we've done is we now have a ribbon, right? We're now able to edit. So that's the external site. So we'll go back to our internal site. And now we have our new ribbon. We have the new search delegate. We probably have to do some styling there. But, I mean, it's over. That's it. Our SharePoint 2010 site is now running SharePoint 2013, and we now have advantage of all the 2013 features. That's it. I'm not done, but that's it. It's pretty simple. It's actually so simple, it's almost boring, and you guys are like, there's no way. Before I move on, are there any questions on what we just did? Yes? So the question is, what is the path for a SharePoint 2007 site? So if you have the old site, you're probably going to be into that third bucket, which is new from existing. You're going to take that 2007 content database, mount it on a 2010 site to update the schema, and then you're going to take that 2010 site and mount it over to 2013. As far as your UI and customizations, if you've revved your 2007 site to kind of keep up with some of the HTML standards and stuff, then you might be able to just take your UI and just bring it right over. Bring your CSS over, bring your JavaScript over, and your markup. But if not, then you're probably going to want to create brand new markup, brand new CSS, and brand new JavaScript when you're on the 2013 side. You do need a middle farm, but that middle farm is kind of a temporary thing. You just want it to have the 2010 schema with the right service pack, and then that's going to allow you to take that content database and move it over to 2013. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is, what about the web part zones and what about my page layouts? We heard about this new thing that you guys now remove tables from web part zones. Will the upgrade take care of that? It'll move all your content over. It'll keep all your web part zones and everything there, but it doesn't change your markup. I'm actually getting to that. How do I take advantage of now some of the HTML views and take advantage of some of that? Short answer, no, it's not going to change it. Long answer is there's a process for it. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. I owe you $20 because that's the part that I'm going to try to get working towards the end. How to get rid of that. Yeah. All right. So now, Contosa Pharmaceuticals has moved their stuff over. It's off of 2010. Now it's running on SharePoint 2013. I have my 2013 master page, so I have my ribbon, and I can edit my content, and I can see my content. Now I want to use some of the new features, right? I don't like pages in the URL like the gentleman over there. And I also want to support designers that use non-PCs, right? If you have a Fruit device and something other than Windows machine, I want to be able to support that. And I heard about these new features this week around the HTML design view. How do I now take advantage of that and apply that back to my SharePoint 2010 site that I just migrated? So the process for this is really going to be trying to separate your ASPX markup from your HTML, and then you're going to create a HTML view of that. That HTML view is going to turn around and create the ASPX for your site. So the very high-level process, you're going to separate your HTML from your ASPX master page. You're going to design and update your HTML design to make sure you've got your HTML correct. You're going to encode your markup with snippets. If you've seen the snippet gallery, I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like. We're going to take your snippets and bring those over. You're going to upload your HTML design, and then you're going to do some checkbox magic. You're going to rename your old HTML to the old name, and you're going to check a box that I'm going to show you in a second to not associate. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what that association does. You're going to save, and then you're going to do it one more time, and this time you're going to check the box. What it's going to do is generate the page layout with the same name. That then updates the page layouts for all the other sites. That seemed like a lot of steps. What does that look like? In general, very high level, your publishing list item has an attachment, has a little attachment column to its page layout. That page layout has ASPX and HTML markup inside of it. What we've done in 2013 is we've separated that. And by the separation, once we separate that, create your HTML and your ASPX, we create a link between those two, and that's what the association does. And I'll show you what the UI looks like. When I upload a master page, an HTML master page, I'm going to upload that HTML. I'm going to check that box called Associate, and it's going to create an ASPX. Same thing for page layouts. I'm going to upload my HTML with my same name as my page layouts, and then I'm going to check the box, and it's going to create the ASPX equivalent, which will then allow me to take advantage of the new HTML design view and not having to touch my other page layouts. This is the process here. I did this already, but this is just a visual of what it is I have to do. You might have more markup, you might have more controls, more things in your site, but as a very kind of bare minimum, you're going to update some register tags, you're going to pull over some script links. In my case, I use Seattle Master as an example. You're going to update the search box, and you're going to bring over the SharePoint ribbon. You're also going to add those other tags, the SharePoint SPHTML tag and the SharePoint form tag. You want to make sure those are there because that allows the ribbon to figure out where it is, and it also allows some hooks. We've got some jQuery hooks into the different page DOM so that we know where we are as part of all the client-side JavaScript. All right, so let's go ahead and update our master page to the HTML design view. this case, I'm going to go to Design Manager, Edit Master Page, and here, the Edit Master Page, I don't have my extranet one in there because it doesn't participate in the HTML design view. The only ones that participate in here are the ones that are marked with that content type of publishing page HTML. I'm going to convert an HTML file, and in this case, I'm going to add one. And the one I'm going to add is my extranet 2013 master with managed nav. So what I've done is I've already separated the HTML. I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. This is a HTML master page. It's compatible with 15. And here the associated file, because I named it differently, I'm not going to worry about this checkbox. But if I wanted it to update my old master page, I would check that box. I'd uncheck the box, click Save, and then check the box again, and then hit Save. And what that would do is it would create the .master page overriding my existing one. If I had one already there and I did the upload, it will yell, and it'll say, hey, you're trying to upload a file, but there's a file that already exists. So the way to get around that is you uncheck the box, and then you check the box. And what that does is it fires an event receiver. That event receiver will then parse the HTML and then create the .master file. Now, again, I'll show you what that HTML looks like with all the different tags. We'll hit Save. Go to my master pages. I want to use my extranet master with HTML. So now it's updated. Go back to site settings. Master page. Now I have an extranet with managed nav. Hit OK. Go back to our site. And whoa, we got some managed nav things. But what we've done is the master page now has an HTML design view that I can then edit. I'm going to enable the managed nav in a second, or a few seconds. But now we have the HTML. Let's see what that HTML looks like. Extranet master with managed nav. We'll do this. All right, so what we're going to see in this HTML page is it looks kind of like an HTML page, but it has kind of this funny markup. And what they're doing in order to help you shuttle your content from an HTML view to a dynamic ASPX page is they've created this markup language that they use to then parse out the things that you're doing in your HTML page and create the dynamic controls on the other side. What that allows you to do is use the snippet gallery, and the snippet gallery just contains the bare bones markup that the parser needs to actually create the true ASPX markup on the other side. So here we have some markup here where we've got some register tag prefixes. I have here a robots meta tag, and you'll kind of see it looks kind of like markup. This stuff here is all dynamic. That's going to get parsed and sent over to the other side. When we created it from the from the upload process, when you saw that thing that says conversion successful, I'll go back to that and show you. But here it created some fields, and here we can kind of see where's our field controls at. All right, so here we have the site logo in there, and these are our snippets. Where do we get those snippets from? Let's go back to our site. Let's go to Design Manager. Edit our master page. In this case, we'll click on our master page. This then is going to parse out some of the HTML and provide me kind of a preview of what that is going to look like. Click this little button up here called Snippets. This takes me to the snippet gallery, and the snippet gallery allows me to then plug in those different HTML markup components and map them into my site. And now I can start taking advantage of some of the features that are available in 2013 and not having to modify my markup, right? I've got my HTML. Now I just plug that HTML in, and then my designer can then edit. Take the snippet, you pass them the snippet, they just plug it in where the SharePointiness needs to be, and then that's the way you do the interaction back and forth with the designer and the SharePoint. So another thing here I want to show you. Go back here. I'm going to go to you see this upload design files. We have a path here. Now, if I'm using my favorite design tool or my not favorite design tool, I can then give that away. How many Dreamweaver fans in the room? How many designers in the room? This demo's not going to go well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I was expecting a room full of designers, and I jumped the shark. This is my Mac experience. I have a Mac. I am connected to my SharePoint site. I have my design tool, and my design tool here can then open up. Where am I? Extranet. Let's see here. So if you could imagine you were a designer and you had a black turtleneck, I would point them to a file share. An unknown error will occur. And here I can edit my master page. I'm connected to that SharePoint site from a Mac in my design tool. Nobody is excited about this. This will not go well. Man, we'll put a div in there, and we'll put some content in there, and then we'll close our div, and then we'll hit save. Huh? Because no one cares. Go back to my site. And I did add a div to my master page, and it should show up somewhere. There's my div with my content. I just edited a SharePoint site from a design tool on a Mac with a bunch of devs in the room who don't care. All right, so what does that look like? What does all that markup look like? Well, here I have my, when I'm parsing this out and kind of looking at it, my markup is going to look like this. The CS tag is going to be my comment start, and that's just something that tells SharePoint, hey, parser, start looking at me. I might include some stuff that you need. In the middle there, you've got the SPM markup tag, and that says, hey, parser, I'm some SharePointy stuff. I want you to parse me out when you run that event receiver from the HTML to create the ASPX page. And then I'm going to end it with some comments there, comment tags. And that's what the actual snippets are doing. If you wanted to create your own snippet markup, you could do that. If you wanted to add your own and kind of hard code your own on the fly, this is kind of the structure that you're going to be using with your markup. When I update my CSS and JavaScript references, I want to mark them up similar to this. I want to put a markup start and a preview start. The preview start allows me to do some the preview view. And there I'm going to end it with a preview end and then a markup end. That's the way I've got my CSS. Now, one interesting one here is the SharePoint token. So in SharePoint 2010, you used to be able to use the squiggly site collection and some of the SharePoint tokens. Well, for the parser, because it's an XML type parser, you have to encode that with the XML equivalent. So in this case here, it's &#60. And that's going to take the SharePoint token and then allow it to move over on the other side, which is the squiggly tag markup ones, the % tags. Mapping some of the things, if I've got a snippet gallery, with my snippet gallery, I'm going to map it to my page layout. This is kind of what it looks like, right? For each snippet, your mileage may vary for the different web parts. Your mileage may also vary on the different page layouts. But this is kind of what you're going to be doing. You're going to look at snippets. You're going to look at your wireframes and your site. And you're going to try to map those in. Any questions on snippets, snippet gallery, HTML design view, Yes, sir. So the question is, what happens to that HTML? Is it stored in the content database, or does SharePoint do some magic? When you saw it in the browser, I don't know if you caught it. Let me go back. Actually, I can just do it here. I just went to the master page gallery. Oh, I'm sorry. So here it's all in there. That HTML. So there's my master with managed nav HTML and my master with managed nav.master. And I upload my HTML. It does the parsing, creates the .master file. Same thing for page layouts. I'm going to upload my page layout HTML, and then it's going to create my ASPX markup by parsing all that. Now, it's a process you're going to have to go through. You've got to get used to it. The parser is not finicky, but it needs to have a structure that is XHTML compliant. So there's some things that you might have to do to your markup. But as I was going through the process, it's just something you've got to do to take advantage of some of this. Yep. Hmm? Hmm? So the question is Expression Web. I don't use Dreamweaver, I use Expression Web. Can I use that? Yes, you could actually use Notepad++. All you do is you're mounting it to a WebDAV file, and you're exploring that just like a file share. You just give out that HTTP link, allow your favorite design tool, you go connect to it, and then once you're connecting to it, you're actually going to see that gallery represented. You open up those HTML files, edit them, save. You do it Notepad, Notepad++, Visual Studio, your the design tool of choice. Yep. Yes, sir. So the question is this capability on premise, or can I do this in 365? So 365 has some of this available. There's some things that it doesn't have. There was actually a session on public internet sites, I believe it was yesterday. So I would refer you to that talk to see the capabilities. But as far as design manager, design package, that's all in 365. The HTML design view, that's all in 365. If you have a 365 URL, you just point to it with your design tool, and then you're able to view it. Yes, sir. So the question is, how do I add my custom controls to the snippet gallery? So right now, there's no extensibility for the snippet gallery. But if you have a custom ASPX, like an ASPX control, what you would do is there's a snippet gallery item. Got time to show you. Go back to our master page. Click here. The snippet gallery. There's this snippet called Custom ASP.NET Markup. You would put your markup in the box, whatever your ASCX control markup is, click Update, and then when you click Update, it's going to give you the snippet for it. And then you would then take that snippet and give it to your designer, and the designer would just plug it into the HTML. Yep. So the question is, there a separate snippet gallery? If you're working with page layouts, yes, it's different. The master page is going to give you some of the master page stuff, and then the page layout is actually going to give you some of the content fields. I'll show you that in a second. All right, let's go back here. All right, so some tips, some things that I found as I was going through this. You want to make sure that you're inventorying your placeholders. There's some things in the master page in Seattle Master and some of the out-of-the-box SharePoint ones, because we moved to more of a different model around placing elements on the screen where it's more CSS versus actual placeholders. Some of the placeholders are actually hidden below the fold, and there's some placeholders, if you've added them in SharePoint 2010, they're just not going to come over, so you've got to go manually add them. So you want to make sure you inventory your placeholders as part of your page layouts. A cheap way to do that is you take all your HTML, your ASPX placeholders, and just do a search for ASP content placeholders. and then just do a search for those. And that's kind of a cheap way to do it in Visual Studio or the file system or something like that. You want to create a new, what I call dev temp site, and that's going to help you with the experience of shuttling some of this HTML and some of this ASPX markup back and forth. You probably don't want to do this with your production site, so I just call it a dev temp just to kind of get you used to the experience there. As far as your site assets, when you have your dev temp site, you want to copy all your images and all your CSS over so that your references are the same. And once the references are all the same, you can then take your completed HTML and just upload the HTML to the new site collection, to the actual published site collection, and then it's going to go ahead and create the page layouts for you. Search, I already talked a little bit about that. And then you reset your master page and then test, which is some of the things I did. So what if I don't want to move to the HTML design view? What do I lose? One of the things I lose is that design experience. I'm not able to connect to it with my favorite design tool. I'd lose kind of that HTML snippet gallery type of thing. If I don't use this, then I have to start thinking about deploying and managing design assets around how do I deploy my page layouts, how do I deploy my master pages, things like that. And then how do I manage my design assets? So now when I'm managing them, I'm doing it with probably features and WSPs, and I'm probably deploying that content in SharePoint 2010. If I don't move to the HTML design model, then I'm probably just going to do the exact same thing. And my design experience workflow is going to be, designer gives me markup, I take markup, I convert it to ASPX. That ASPX then gets packaged to a feature. That feature then gets deployed. So that's kind of your process if you don't use this model. If you do use the model, your process is a little different. Your process is create site, and it might be, hey, designer, here's your URL, right? Mess with the HTML ones, and then we'll take care of the rest. That might be your process. I totally understand that there's some times where you want to do some versioning and some source control. If you go through this in this way and you create your new design assets in SharePoint 2013, what you want to do is make sure that you go back to the old WSPs and repackage your new stuff. Otherwise, you might overwrite some of your things in 2013. So think about your workflow. Think about how you're going to be doing this design experience now that you have this capability. How do I enable managed nav? So I've got friendly URLs. How do I do that? Well, in my case, my content database had some managed columns, and what I did was I just mounted the MMS to SharePoint 2013. That upgraded the MMS schema, and now I can just check a box and enable a term for navigation if I wanted to. I could also use that managed nav within my site, and I'll show you what that experience looks like. If I wanted to do the new search-driven pages, where I want to do terms and friendly URLs, well, I've got to pick a tagging term set. And that tagging term set, if it's in my content, I just elect one of those, make sure all my content has been tagged with that particular tagging term set. If I don't, then I have to create a column and either manually push it down, or if you have kind of a content type hierarchy structure, add it to your base content type, and that's going to be your managed metadata column that's used for your tagging term set. That's going to allow you to use some of the search-driven pages and some of the search-driven functionality if you don't have it, if you don't have those tags in 2010. You just go ahead and do it on the 2013 side. And then the last one there is around the category pages. Once you're moving to a search-driven model, now you've got to go back. You've probably had structured site versus managed site. On the structured side, you create an information architecture by creating webs and subwebs. When you move to managed nav, well, now you've got to make a decision. Do I use the web name, or do I use the FURL name or the friendly URL? And if I'm going to use the friendly URL, I can't use the web name. So because of the way that the URL parsing works, you want to be able to, it's got to resolve to one or the other. So you've got to look at your information architecture and possibly change it if you've been using structured nav. You want to possibly take a look at that if you want to use managed nav and start enabling that now. All right, so let's try this here. Let me go through a few steps and I'll come back. In order to upgrade your MMS database, I've got a SharePoint 2010 site, and that SharePoint 2010 site had an MMS. In order to upgrade it, fairly simple. I point it. When I create my new managed metadata service, I point it to my old database, and it goes ahead and upgrades that. There's the PowerShell equivalent. I just point it to my database name. Once I do that, I want to update my publishing control. So the navigation control In the old sites, you were probably using publishing navigation, this portal sitemap data source. In the new managed nav model, you're going to use the other data source. So you want to go ahead and change your navigation to that new data source. If you were using web templates or you created sites based on blank #0, when you bring those sites over, if you didn't have these features enabled, you have to go ahead and enable them. These aren't things that you'll see through the UI, but you'll have to go in through PowerShell and actually enable the taxonomy feature and the managed metadata feature on your site collection if they weren't there. So this was kind of a gotcha that I found as I was migrating, which was actually good, because that means I found it, and it's available for someone else to block. No kickers. Wow. How much time we have left? Rough crowd. All right, so let's go ahead and enable some managed nav. So I already have my new master page here. Let's go back on my authoring site. And here I have pages/home. What I want to do is enable managed nav. So I'll go to my site settings. Actually, let me do this first. Let me show you the term store, what the term store looks like. Refresh that. All right, so it updated my term store. I have my site collection navigation here. Now, the way you get this little node, the way you get this enabled, is you go to Site Settings, Navigation. You want to tick Manage Nav for both my global and my current nav. When you do that, the UI is going to change a little bit, and it's going to show you whatever your default managed metadata service that you're connected to. It's going to show you that. You're going to click it, and you're going to push this little button here called Create Term Set. Create Term Set is going to create this particular term set node, and this one is going to represent my navigation, in my case. Click OK. Go back home. And I already have my term set up. And for each one of these terms, when I migrated them over, some of these things weren't there. But my navigation term set, you check the box for intended use. And when you check this box for using this term set for navigation, you get some new tabs that light up for each one of the terms that are underneath here. In my case, I already had a term set called Home. It is available for navigation. So you see that light up there. And here, I'm going to use a term-driven page with a friendly URL. In order to point it to an existing page, I could either create this as a simple link or header to just point to an existing page, or I can say term-driven page with a friendly URL. Go to the term-driven pages tab. In this case, I'm going to check the box for creating a target page for this item, and I'm going to point it to the /home.aspx. I could point it to another one. We'll point it to our contact page. Click Save. And now we will go back to our site. Hit refresh. If you notice the URL, there are no pages in that URL. Settling in. It's my favorite picture. How do I deal with what I call post-migration stress, right? These migrations are going to be kind of stressful. You got some things to think about. The first one there, you've got to do an address change sometimes. So you got to deal with 301s, 302s, 401s, 404s. You got to deal with all this stuff. How do I deal with broken links and content? If I moved from a structure where I used to have pages in the URL, and now I moved to a friendly URL structure, how do I deal with migrating my stuff over? You can do that using this. There's a new sitemap feature in SharePoint 2013. You can enable that feature, and then it will kick out a sitemap for you that you can then submit to the search engines. There are other ways to deal with this around search-driven pages and category pages, where you can now provide an experience where users will be able to be redirected. One thing that we did for a customer, and we're testing this out, is we migrated our content from 2010 to 2013. We're using a third-party tool. But when we did that, we actually created a new column called old URL. And we put that old URL in that field. So now on the other side, when we're actually showing that page, if somebody were to hit that old URL, we're going to redirect to our custom 404 page. We're going to do a search for that old URL and then redirect that user over to the existing piece of content. Right? So that's just a silly trick that we did, and so far it's working okay. So go ahead and try that. Will I like it? Right? You do have to do some new author training because there is a new ribbon. There's it's blue and not dark blue, so you got to teach your users. They're going to freak out. Archive and data retention. As I'm dealing with migration, if my site was part of regulation or something like that, I have to deal with the archive and the retention when I migrate it over to make sure that my last modified by are still correct, and make sure that my structure around our archive and policies around reporting and things like that when you migrate it over. This one's important when you move to claims, because when you're in classic mode, your audit logs will have that classic URL. When you bring them over, your audit logs will not come over. And if they do come over, let's say you've published them to your site, your audit logs now have the old classic URL, or your old classic name, domain / not your new claims name. So you've got to figure out how to map that up as part of your audit logs if that's important to you. Statistics and ratings. So if you've built custom features or you use some of the out-of-the-box features, like web analytics, those web analytics aren't going to come over, so you're not going to be able to get that. Me talking to customers, I'd say 95% of the customers today using 2007 and 2010 for internet sites probably use some other tool to actually gather metrics. They use some third-party tools to do that. But keep that in mind. If you use the page ratings feature, if you maybe you had a partner website with authenticated users and you were using some of the page ratings, you've got to think about what that's going to happen when you bring that over to the new site. So you got to think through that. And then ways to reduce stress. One important kind of tidbit for you guys, if I use FBA on my site in 2010, and I use kind of the out-of-the-box FBA configuration, when I migrate that over, I've got to reconfigure FBA on the SharePoint 2013 side, but I also have to think about that password. That password, if I use DPAPI, was tied to the MAC address or the key, the web key, the machine key on that other side. So I've got to either bring over that machine key or think about it as hey, everybody, we moved to a new website. Please change your password, right? Because you've now lost the ability to decrypt those passwords. So think through that as you're migrating your public sites. Common questions that we get, right? What if I'm launching a 2010 site soon? What do I do? Go ahead and do it. Just figure out that when your path is going to be for actual migration. And it might be that you're at a point where you're just designing wireframes, and you might be able to pause your project, reconfigure the way you're going to design your site around SharePoint 2013 and not 2010. If you're far enough along, then think through using some of the architectural things that are going to help you around migration, like using web templates, like possibly using some of the managed metadata fields. Tag your content now so that you don't have to retag the content later. So there's some things to think about. If I'm starting a brand new project, download the bits and do it on 2013. And if you don't believe me, I don't know what to tell you. What can I do with 365? We got that question in the back. There were some other talks around public websites. So there's we did announce with 365 that there's a public website feature. If you have a very large website, that's probably not going to be the one for you. But if you have a small to medium website, definitely take a look at the capabilities that they have in 365, because you might be able to get off of hosting some of these smaller microsites and maybe put those out in the cloud. Some other considerations. I already talked about undoing your changes. If you create new ASPX pages or create new HTML design pages and you redeploy your WSPs, you're going to blow away your stuff potentially if it's got the same name. If you have a content database and you've mounted it and you then trash your content database and recreate it, your HTML design views are gone, right? So you've got to think about repackaging those WSPs. What about apps? So there's a question about apps, and that question will be handled by the gentleman right here in the front. That guy right there. I'm pointing to an empty chair. Apps for anonymous access, they're still working through that. There's some things you can do with apps and anonymous websites. There's some other things you can do with apps and authenticated websites, but that's a more complicated topic, and I'm not here to cover that. You also have to configure publishing cache accounts. So when you migrate your sites over from SharePoint 2010. If you had these errors in your event log, in 2010, you could possibly ignore them. In 2013, it's very hard to ignore them because your site will give you access denied, and you won't be able to get in when you move over to claims. A way to know that you're having this problem is if you're continually getting access denied, go to _layout/settings.aspx. If you can get to that page, then you know it's not access denied and it's probably a publishing cache problem. You can recreate those in 2013, or if you had them configured in 2010, these were stored at the web app level, so you have to recreate them over on the 2013 side. So keep that in mind. And there's some PowerShell, so if you download the deck, you can get access to that. What about new from existing? Like, is there an existing technique where I've got SharePoint 2010 content? I might be bringing over the content, but I'm not updating the UI. Here's an option for you. I haven't tried this. We're doing this, something similar on category pages, but just kind of thinking through, I'm calling it an integration technique. I've got a SharePoint 2010 site collection or a bunch of site collections. I can enable manage metadata fields on those. I can tag my content, and then I can use the new cross-site publishing feature to cross-site publish that to a public website. So that allows me to keep my content kind of as it stayed in 2010, but allows me to build a brand new UI around my 2010 content without having to deal with, updating my master page, updating my page layout, and going back to some of the legacy stuff. This is what I'm calling an integration technique. Again, haven't tried this yet, but this is an option for you. I have done cross-site publishing, but you can then pull that into your managed nav and then walk through this. There's the high-level steps of how you would do this if you wanted to prove this out. You want to tag your content. You want to activate the cross-site publishing feature on your site collection. After you do that, you're going to do a full crawl. After you do a full crawl, after you've tagged your content, the full crawl is then going to pick up. It's going to activate those, push those over to tag and term sets, push those into the search index, and now you're able to take advantage of some of the search-driven pages on the rendering side. If you want an online reference for some of the changes between 2010 and 2013, and specifically around migration, there's a link for you. Other than that, I'm open for questions. Yes, sir.